First, in these other economies, as they made this transition away from low-end goods towards higher-end goods, their overall global market share started to come down. So this is in a way a trade-off, right? They moved into making more higher value-added goods, which is good for economic development and so on. But the trade-off of that was they lost labor-intensive products. And labor-intensive products tend to move to other economies, and therefore their global market share in terms of exports fell. And that was particularly obvious in Taiwan and Japan after 1990, 1989 or thereabouts. So there was a clear trend, there was a cost to the export transition that occurred. Now, if you look at China today, that just isn't happening. So the export transition is very common with other economies. But if you look at China's market share, it's increasing more quickly today than any time since China entered the WTO back in 2003. Now, back in 2003, China's global market share was very small. So increasing it wasn't a particularly big challenge. Today, China is already the biggest exporter in the world, and yet its market share, particularly in volume terms, is increasing just as quickly as it was 20 or 30 years ago. That did not happen in Japan or Taiwan and Korea. That is one of the things that's very unusual about China today, and is obviously important when the rest of the world is thinking about protectionism and so on. The second thing that stands out about China is that as that process played out in the other economies, import demand tended to hold up as well. So just as they were losing market share externally, they're also steadily increasing the proportion of imports coming into their domestic economies. There were different reasons for this, right? One in Japan in the 1990s was because Japan was a very protected economy. And so there was a lot of room for liberalization, which allowed cheaper imports to come in. But the point is that this was an offset, right? So on the one hand, they could be exporting capital goods to the rest of the world. On the other hand, they were importing more domestically. Now, that hasn't happened in China. So again, if you look at these two things, both in terms of the export side, like this big increase in export market share that's happened over the course of the last 2 years or so, that's exceptional. But just as exceptional is how quickly China's import market share has fallen.